We begin with this. He is tall, lean, and blonde with dazzling white teeth, and he looks ever so much like Robert Redford. He dates slinky fashion models, belongs to the most elegant clubs, and at only 30 years of age, estimates that he is worth more than $200 million. That is how the New York Times described Donald Trump in 1976. If you ask Donald Trump then and now, he'd say his most valuable asset was his brand. And for decades, the name Trump has been synonymous with wealth. Trump promoted himself to the world as a business genius. Want to be rich? Be like Trump.
You'll walk down the street sometimes and people will touch you just for the good luck.
I've never figured that out. I've never really understood it, but it's something that's been happening. And at first I took great offense at it. Now I guess I have to consider it a compliment. I don't know what it is, but perhaps they're going into a deal or they're going down to Atlantic City or they're going someplace and they just want to have a little luck.
But the myth of Trump has always been riddled with inconsistencies. In 1987, Trump came out with what would become the cornerstone of his business franchise, The Art of the Deal. Years later, Trump's ghostwriter, who actually wrote the book, told the New Yorker that he felt like he had put lipstick on a pig. In reality, Trump's businesses have failed over and over again. He bought an airline. It tanked. He bought a football team. The league folded. And still, Donald Trump managed to sell the public this idea that he was the monopoly man.
Trump's got a new game. Trump's got a new deal. What's your game, Donald?
Trump has a new game. What is it?
Is it an airline? A new convention airline, Mr. Trump. Is it a convention? What's your game? Mr. Trump, please.
My new game is Trump, the game.
Trump, the game where you deal for everything you've ever wanted to own. Because it's not whether you win or lose. It's whether you win.
Yes!
Play Trump, the game from Milton Bradley.
I think you'll like it.
Trump even lost money on casinos. Not in them, on them, as an owner. In the early 90s, 3 different Trump casinos in Atlantic City filed for bankruptcy. You have to be astoundingly bad at business to not make money as a casino owner. But still, Donald Trump convinced the public he was the epitome of success.
I've mastered the art of the deal and have turned the name Trump into the highest quality brand. And as the master, I want to pass along my knowledge to somebody else. I'm looking for The Apprentice.
Everywhere you looked, Trump was on TV reminding you how rich he was, how profitable his businesses were, how lucky you were to be associated with him.
It's great to be here at Saturday Night Live, but I'll be completely honest. It's even better for Saturday Night Live that I'm here.
Trump stuck his name on everything from golf courses and apartments to vodka and steaks. There was even a Trump urine test, because why not? If Trump was involved, it was good business, even if it was a urine test. So that was the story that launched Trump's political career, and ultimately the story that won him the White House. But again, the myth did not always match up with reality. In 2016, Trump was forced to pay $25 million to settle a lawsuit claiming that the university he stuck his name on was defrauding students bigly. In 2019, New York dissolved Trump's charity and fined him $2 million because, as it turns out, Trump had been using it as a charity for Donald Trump. But still, if you ask the man himself, the Trump name remained sterling.
Probably my most valuable asset I didn't even include on your statement, and that's the brand. I mean, I became president because of the brand, okay? I became president. I think it's the hottest brand in the world.
That was Trump's video deposition from his civil fraud trial in New York City, the case where today the myth of Donald Trump came to an end. Today, a New York judge, Justice Arthur Engoron, ordered Trump to pay a colossal penalty, which, with interest, will exceed $450 million. Justice Engoron also barred Mr. Trump from serving in any leadership roles in any New York company, including the one that bears his name, the Trump Organization, for 3 years. Now, the reason this penalty is so massive is because the fraud was, too. As Justice Engoron put it in his ruling today, The frauds found here leap off the page and shock the conscience. New York Attorney General Letitia James investigated Trump and his businesses for years. And what she found was that Trump had been fraudulently inflating his net worth by billions of dollars for a decade. And I don't just mean in the press and on TV ads for Trump urine tests, but in financial statements and loan applications. And that meant not only was Trump tricking the public into thinking he was wildly successful, he was tricking banks and insurance companies into giving him loans and rates that he didn't actually qualify for. He cheated. He is a cheat. And making sure that no one cheats, that the world of New York business plays by the rules, is central to Judge Engoron's decision today. This court is not constituted to judge morality. It is constituted to find facts and apply the law. In this particular case, in applying the law to the facts, the court intends to protect the integrity of the financial marketplace and thus the public as a whole. That protection includes penalties for past wrongs and insurance against future ones. So in addition to freezing the Trumps out of their family business for 3 years, the judge is keeping an independent monitor on watch, and he is appointing an independent director of compliance at the Trump Organization. Engoron explained that without all of this, the cheating might never end. Defendants' refusal to admit error, indeed to continue it, constrains this court to conclude that they will engage in it going forward unless judicially restrained. As Donald Trump tells it, people used to touch him for luck when he was walking down the street. Today, it seems like he might be all out of it. Joining me now to discuss today's ruling are my good friends and colleagues, the hardest bookings in America, Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell. Guys, thank you so much for being here on this momentous day. I am honored to have you on this program. Rachel, we haven't heard from you today. Lawrence, we haven't heard from you today. Rachel, I'll just let you get the first word here. But what was your reaction to what feels like a day of reckoning for Donald Trump?
It is a day of reckoning, almost literally, for sure. And it is also one of a number of really important court proceedings that are going to have really important consequences for him. And I feel like, you know, once I read as much as I could of the ruling, a lot of it's dense, but a lot of it just makes sense. Once you understand exactly what he's ordering, once we saw Tish James's explanation of what happened, we saw Trump's reaction to it, I kind of sat back and I realized my biggest takeaway from this is that we need to protect the rule of law. that this is a candidate who is promising to, you know, basically dismantle the American system of government. He has been raging against the judiciary and judges and juries and lawyers and plaintiffs and the whole system that is starting to hold him to account. He wants to get back into power, he's fully saying, because he essentially wants to dismantle the whole thing. And for all of the institutions that have failed against what Donald Trump is offering as an anti-democratic, small d democratic, essentially authoritarian candidate, the institution that has bent the least, that has stood up the best against his assault is the judicial branch of government, is the rule of law. And we need to protect it. We need to protect Judge Engoron. We need to protect his clerk. We need to protect Tish James. We need to protect E. Jean Carroll. We need to protect her lawyers. We need to protect the jurors. We need to protect Fani Willis. And we should talk about that because that's happening right now. But we need to protect Jack Smith. We need to protect Judge Cannon and Judge Chutkan. We need to protect the people who are manning the barricades on this one branch of government that's doing its job, despite what has been a really, really, I think, pointed assault from Trump and his supporters that is about to get way more intense.
Yeah. Lawrence, Rachel makes such an essential point about the branch of government that's holding democracy aloft. Yeah. I wonder what you thought of the ruling.
First of all, on your trip down Trump memory lane, I thought I had nothing to learn. Then came, I learned tonight, about the Trump urine test.
Yes, I'm
which
sorry.
I believe,
yeah.
which I believe.
I apologize.
My count is you mentioned them 3 times.
Yeah, well, you know,
and
Trump and urine. I won't go further than that.
I had no idea he was that interested in
Urine.
That. Well, yeah.
I'll say it. You don't have
to. Okay, great. So I just needed to
leave that right there.
I know.
Says a lot.
I know there were people in the audience who were still processing that, and I wanted to help them with it and move on to this. But so I have spent my entire adult life, professional life, in and out of courtrooms, following cases very closely. Some cases every single day in the courtroom. And there are some cases that are predictable. And so when you get to verdict, it doesn't feel quite so momentous or like something's changed because it was the only logical verdict. This Trump verdict today was the most predictable Trump verdict we will ever have because there was no jury. Juries still contain suspense. No jury, one fact finder, the judge. He made it very clear, because he's a rational human being, as the proceeding was going on, that all of this was outrageous, that Donald Trump's conduct in the room was outrageous, everything about it was outrageous. And so he returns this verdict that we could have kind of guessed the number within $10 million, because it was the number that kept being said. And yet, it truly is, it landed with me as something truly momentous. But here is this former president, current presidential candidate, on his way to the nomination, and he's now very clearly on his way to what could be functional bankruptcy for him. Because the lawsuits that I think people have left too far into the back of mind might actually be the most expensive things he's facing, which are the lawsuits by police officers in Washington, D.C. for what happened to them on January 6th. We saw what the defamation verdict was against Rudy Giuliani in Washington, D.C., over $100 million. Donald Trump could get hit with a verdict like this against an individual police officer in Washington, D.C. So he could be facing over $1 billion in these kinds of must-pay penalties.
Civil trials.
And which raises this other deep threat to the possibility of another Trump presidency, which is how will he pay these things? And the answer is Jared Kushner knows a guy.
Well, yes.
And the guy's in Saudi Arabia. And how many billion do you need?
Yeah, I mean, that raises a really important question, Rachel, which is it is not good for democracy. And Vox raises this point today. It's not good for democracy and transparency and rule of law for Donald Trump to face a really steep bill, not because he shouldn't have to face it, but because, as Lawrence says, I mean, this leads you down inevitably the rabbit hole of which country is going to pay this tab effectively.
Yeah, I mean, when I was reading that part of Judge Engoron's ruling today about how one of the restrictions here is that the Trump Organization can't get loans from any bank that is registered in New York. Well, in the normal scheme of things, when you cover financial trials and any trials that have that end up, for example, in SDNY, just because there's a financial institution involved, the shorthand that you do when covering these things is like, oh yeah, all financial institutions are registered to do business in New York. New York is the financial capital of the world, and so that's why they have jurisdiction over everything financial. But what Lawrence says is exactly right. Yeah, you know, I mean, it was a mysterious Russian bank that funded Marine Le Pen in her pseudo-fascist run at the French presidency, right? And it's inexplicably, it's Saudi Arabia that has given $2 billion to Jared Kushner for his great service in public life, which he now says he's not going to return to. So, I mean, the financial penalties here have incredible potential consequences in terms of the types of entanglements that Trump will have absolutely no problem dragging into the White House with him if he's reelected.
You know, you bring up, Lawrence, the civil fraud trial and the civil cases against Trump. And I have to ask you, we're going to continue this conversation. I'm just going to say it preemptively before anybody thinks I'm going to let you guys go. But, Lawrence, you bring up the civil cases, and I wonder, you know, there's a huge question mark hanging over whether or not these federal criminal trials actually see the light of day this year before the election. If the American public only is able to hold Donald Trump accountable in a civil fashion, a la Eugene Carroll, a la Letitia James, or the first responders and police officers at January 6th. Is that sufficient? Is that enough?
Well, first of all, I don't think that's going to be the outcome for a couple of reasons. The first reason being, I don't believe Donald Trump is going to win the presidency. Therefore, with that belief, I don't particularly care when the trials happen. The federal trials. Everyone is worried about, federal trials before election because they're afraid if you don't get those federal trials done before the election, then Donald Trump becomes president and he kills them. Well, under that theory, he kills them anyway because they would be on appeal. If he was convicted, they'd be on appeal. But I don't believe he's going to be president. I believe you're going to see every one of these cases go all the way to their conclusions, and he will bear whatever criminal burden he has to bear as a convicted defendant in those cases. It's worth noting, none of them involve a mandatory minimum sentence. So the highest likelihood, which is, I know, dissatisfactory to a lot of people, but it's a version of hell for Trump, would be home confinement. Imagine spending the summer in Florida. That would be unbearable for him.
A fair point, my friend. And what if the pool floods the server room again? Goodness.
This is a persecution of a political opponent. The persecution of a political opponent, a persecution of a political candidate. This is nothing more than selective persecution of Biden's political opponent.
Donald Trump's number one concern on the campaign trail, his bête noire, the thing he says he will not stand for, is when someone in power persecutes their political opponent. He is, of course, talking about his own imaginary political persecution. But today we saw what the actual persecution of a political opponent looks like. Alexei Navalny, the 47-year-old anti-corruption activist and chief political rival of Russian President Vladimir Putin, has died in a Russian jail. That is according to Russia's prison service. President Biden quickly condemned Navalny's reported death and said that President Putin is responsible for it. But there have been no words of condemnation from the de facto leader of the Republican Party. There have actually been no words at all. Donald Trump has said nothing about Navalny or Putin, except for his words late last week when he told Russia that it should feel free to go ahead and attack America's NATO allies, or in his words, do whatever the hell they want. And now Putin apologia is spreading through the GOP like a cancer. A week ago, right-wing personality Tucker Carlson sat down for a 2-hour interview with Putin, which even Putin himself says was full of softball questions. Carlson has since gone viral in videos where he extols the virtues of life under Putin's authoritarianism. Stuff like, yes, there's no democracy or freedom of expression, but do they lock up their grocery carts so the unhoused can't steal them? When pressed about Putin's habit of murdering those who oppose him or jailing them in Arctic gulags, as he did Alexei Navalny before he died, Carlson said this.
Every leader kills people, including my leader. Every leader kills people. Some kill more than others. Leadership requires killing people. Sorry. At a certain point, it's like people can decide whether they think, what countries they think are better, what systems they think are better.
But it is no longer just people like Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson who feel the need to excuse Putin's autocratic behavior. Here was Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville parroting Putin's talking points just this week.
You can tell Putin's on top of his game. One thing he said that it really rung a bell is the propaganda media machine over here. They sell anything they possibly can to go after Russia.
The Republican Party has come to worship strongmen at a time when strongmen around the world are feeling quite emboldened. And now, with what looks like a brazen attempt by Putin to silence his rivals, how should America respond?